Welcome to the Afropolitan Podcast, hosted by Eche Emole, founder of Afropolitan. On the show, we chat with Afropolitans whose footprints form the foundation of systems dedicated to building the future of a bold and progressive Black community. In each episode, our guests share their working formulas, the hard facts about leaving familiar terrain, embracing the unknown, and staying relevant afterwards. Listen as we extract the blueprints of fearlessness, innovation, and progress.
Hey Afropolitans! In today's episode, we chat with Zeneca, founder and CEO of ZenAcademy, an online community where anyone can learn about NFTs and Web3. Zeneca talks to us about burnout in the tech ecosystem and offers advice on trading crypto and NFTs. We hope you enjoy this episode. Roy, welcome to the Afropolitan Podcast. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Awesome. So you were a professional poker player for 15 years before NFTs. How did that transition happen?
Yeah, so there's actually a very large overlap between the poker playing community and crypto community. And I think for various reasons, one is it's just, there's a lot of dealing with finances, money, risk, statistics, that kind of stuff. But then there's another reason that in 2011, in America, they sort of banned online poker or made it largely illegal to play. So then these websites popped up where you could play in Bitcoin. And so then, it became on people's radar. And so I've always been kind of aware of crypto. I didn't really get involved till 2017 when Ethereum was out and a bunch of people started talking about that. But then that bear market hit in 2018 and I sort of left and didn't stick around. And then it was early 2021 when I sort of got brought back in by another friend who I met through poker and other mutual friends who were poker players who had stuck around and known this space and sort of kept tabs on the opportunities and the potential and basically just, kept talking about it. And eventually I was like, all right, let me do some research and try and figure it out. And that was the transition.
Let's talk about burnout in this space, right? A lot of people who are really into this space, and I've seen it among my friends, even for me, we don't get enough sleeping time, right? How do you practice self-care even, navigating this space? And do you take time off to just, you said, because I'm sure you're always getting people like, hey, Roy, can you help with this? Can you help out with this project? Mm-hmm. Multiple Discord channels. How have you learned to navigate that space and also practice self-care?
So I really believe in the value and power of getting 8 hours a night sleep. So that's always been a priority for me. And even before this space, it's been like 3 or 4 years. I read a wonderful book, Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. And that sort of changed my outlook on sleep. And I sort of prioritized sleep. And then I noticed that everything in my life got better. And so ever since I've just made a point that almost no matter what, I'll get my 8 hours sleep. Obviously, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes there's exceptions, but I'd say 95% of the time I'm getting between, say, 7 and 9 hours of sleep just because I make it a huge priority. And yeah, so that sort of helps. There were certainly points last year when I was more aggressively flipping and trading NFTs where I'd not get enough sleep, or I'd get sleep, but then I'd feel anxious that I'd miss a drop or something like that. And that was a bit of a challenge to work through, but eventually I just stayed firm in prioritizing my sleep, and I'm happy that I did. And I still got burnt out, I think everyone does, but that helped. And another thing is early in this year, so I think it was March 2022, I decided both on a personal level, but as a company for ZenAcademy as well, that we're going to try and take weekends off just because this space doesn't sleep. It's 24/7. And so if we don't decide to take time off, we're just not going to take time off. And weekends were just, theoretically we could take any day off or any time off because it's the space runs whenever, but a bunch of the team members they're part-time. Most of them are part-time and some of them have real jobs as well. So I wanted it to be the case that their weekends could be off from work as a whole, as opposed to working, the day job Monday to Friday and then feeling that they have to work all weekend, rather just try and fit it around their schedule outside of that. And so obviously it's very difficult to take the weekends entirely off, and what constitutes work in this space is really blurry. It's hard to know. It's just checking a Discord. sometimes that might be considered work, but I do that on weekends. I sort of think of it more as like light mode. So I just don't schedule meetings on weekends. I try not to do podcast recordings. I try not to just schedule anything. So like I'll do work, but it's usually catching up on email or admin or just hanging out in Discord and chatting to people. And I feel confident, like my mind's at ease that I can just like not look at my calendar all weekend just because I know most of the time there's nothing urgent unless I get pinged, and then it's a different story. So those two things have really helped on the burnout front. But even then, still, I get burnt out. I think everyone gets burned out a bit, and it's just like a side effect of this space. But there's definitely stuff that you can do to reduce the impact of that. And it's actually something I learned from poker as well, because I used to get burnt out a lot from there, and I've grown to understand the importance of putting systems in place to avoid it.
So for the people who are new into the ecosystem, right, can we talk through what a distinction is between NFTs and crypto? You said you got into crypto in 2017. What was that transition like? And within crypto, there is also the NFT space. So what is that distinction, and how did you navigate that?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack. It's a big question. So crypto is like this all-encompassing term that includes NFTs. It includes Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, thousands and thousands of coins and tokens of different varieties and tech. And so everything within NFTs, it's all part of the whole crypto sphere. When I say I got into crypto in 2017, it was Bitcoin and Ethereum, and those are like the two main coins and ecosystems that I started. And I think for most people, like they're the two biggest, and it's like most people identify with them first. And then they look at some of these other coins, and I certainly went down that rabbit hole and like bought a lot of random altcoins and speculated, and oh, this project looks cool. They're trying to solve such and such problem using AI and the blockchain technology. And in that era, it was like this ICO craze, initial coin offering, where projects would launch and then often the price would pump and then come crashing down and there's no substance. And that was like the whole crypto sphere. And NFTs, they're like a particular use case of crypto technology. So Bitcoin is a token. Ether is a token. It's using a token standard, Ether. Yeah. And on the Ethereum blockchain, there's all sorts of other tokens like Uniswap, like SushiSwap, like Aave, like LuxRare, et cetera, et cetera. These are all tokens, and NFTs is just another type of token. It stands for non-fungible token, whereas something like Uniswap token is a fungible token. It's called because you can swap. If I give you 1,000 Uni tokens and you give me 1,000 Uni tokens, like it's exactly the same. But if I give you one NFT and you give me one NFT, there's a lot more to it. We have to figure out, what NFT is it? And like NFTs by nature are unique, non-fungible. And so that's like the differentiation. And they've been around for a while. They were around in 2017. There were some really early NFT projects, even prior to that. But like, CryptoPunk's a big one, CryptoKitties, and many, many more. But they were just never like popular or on many people's radars. They weren't really on mine. I heard about CryptoKitties, but it just seemed a bit silly to me and not like a great use case because I didn't conceptually understand it. And then, over the last 12 to 18 months, I think we've seen a lot more being built and a lot more use cases and innovation and ideas. And like art is a big part of that, where people create art and sell their art as NFTs, which is just, you can't do that with, a regular like ERC20 crypto token or coin. You can't do it without NFT technology. So I think that's when things start getting really interesting, when a creator can sell something unique and specific using NFTs. And there's like 1,000 other use cases, but art is one of the most popular ones.
And so for the listeners who are even new to the space, right, can we help paint a picture of how NFT trading works, and what have been some of your highest of highs and what have been some of your lowest of lows? Because, people come into this space and rug pulls do happen, right? So what is your experience within the ecosystem with that?
Yeah, so like first and foremost, NFT trading and all crypto trading is insanely risky. So the potential is there to just lose all your money. Like on any project, anything you buy, you can lose all the assets in your wallet if you click on a bad link and get scammed and drained. So I say that not to scare people, but just to sort of warn and alert people that you need to know what you're doing and be like hyper vigilant. And it's getting easier, and there's better educational resources, and the infrastructure is improving. Like it's a lot better now than it used to be, but it's going to take time. And so if anyone does want to dabble in the crypto or NFT trading space, just understand how risky it is and only play with money you can afford to lose, basically. I have certainly, bought rug pulls, projects that, the founders just disappear, the projects go to zero, they delete their Discord, they delete their Twitter, there's just nothing there. Probably a lot of them. I've bought projects that, just go to zero for other reasons, and the community doesn't like it. And there are plenty of stories like that. And if you're in the space for long enough and you trade it long enough, it's basically inevitable, and this is part of the risk. But I've had tons of success stories. Probably one of the biggest and probably the most obvious and most known to people is I bought 3 Bored Apes at under 1 ETH. So like between 0.5, 0.8 ETH. I think it was like $1,500 at the time or something like that. Today they're worth, I think, $100,000 each or something like that, a bit over. And that they actually reached like $500,000 at one point. But that is obviously a success story, but it is risky. And like just in that sentence, they used to be 500,000, now they're 100,000. So that's if you bought at the 500,000 mark, you're taking on tremendous risk. I was fortunate enough to sort of get in at an early point, but there've been instances of me buying things at high valuations and having them drop. I remember I bought an archetype, which is a generative art piece by Art Blocks. It's basically art. I paid 30 ETH for it late last year, and when ETH was probably like 3,000 or 4,000, so let's say $100,000. Earlier this year, I think the floor price for the collection was 6 ETH, and ETH was lower. So like that on paper was a massive loss. Like now it's back up around the 30 ETH mark, although ETH is but like this is just to give you an idea of the swings. And if you don't have the right mindset or are not in it for like the long term or the right reasons, you can very easily lose a large amount of money. And the swings are real, but like the potential is there to make good profit if you know what you're doing and with a little bit of luck, of course.
How do you evaluate projects? Like what interests you about certain projects versus the ones you pass on?
Yeah, that's a really big question. And there's a lot that goes into it. I think like I look at what the project is trying to do and I evaluate different types of projects based on different metrics. Like that there are PFP projects like Bored Apes, Cool Cats, Azuki, Doodles, CryptoPunks. Then you have art projects like Art Blocks, which is generative art, GM DAO. You have one of one art. That's where just an artist on their own creates a piece and sells just that piece of art by itself. You have gaming projects, you have metaverse projects, you have music NFTs, photography NFTs, you have membership clubs. There's so many different types of projects, and I think applying the same like approach to blanketly all of them is not usually going to work. So I approach them all slightly differently. Some sort of key things I do look for is the team or the people or the person behind an NFT. I think that's really generally a really important and valuable part for wanting to buy, collect, invest in a token or an ecosystem, is understanding the people behind it, what their motivations are, why they're doing it, what their abilities are and competency and experience. And if they're trying to launch a PFP project to build out a brand with IP and tell stories, just does the team have experience in storytelling and brand building and marketing and all of that kind of stuff and community building? Or are they just, YOLOing something together and just had a fun idea? And that's two very different, and the latter can work. We've seen examples of that work, but it's just a different approach and it's different levels of risk. Similarly, if someone's trying to create a game, does the team have experience in game design and development, and are they being realistic and honest about their goals and vision, or are they promising to create like a AAA game in a year, which is basically impossible? So team, with an artist as well, obviously looking at just the art is a huge part of it. And like, do I like the art? Does the art appeal to me? Is it in a style that I like? Do other people like it? Like if you're looking at it from the view to sell sometime in the future, then you want to know if other people like it and will be interested in it. Sometimes you collect never to sell just because, hey, I like the art, I want to support the artist, and that's amazing. And then that becomes less of a factor. But I still think it's nice to look into the artist, and sort of that's one of the beauties of NFTs. You can often just chat with them, reach out to them on Twitter or in a Discord and have a conversation, a relationship, and ask them like, what was their inspiration behind the art, and why did they create this? Or you don't have a conversation, but they've written about it on their website or on their Instagram or in the description on OpenSea or Super Rare Foundation, and you can dive into the why and the psychology and the backstory of it, and that can help you understand and just make a more educated, informed decision about whether you want to buy or collect something. And so, yeah, I think that's like the biggest thing by far. It's like people, team, And then I look for things like, I really like if something is new and innovative and doing something different, because like, we see a lot of the same stuff. But if a project is doing something different, it's always exciting to me. Although sometimes like the best projects are taking an existing model and just like executing on a better level and doing something, putting their own spin on it. Those are probably the big things.
No, definitely. And thank you for really breaking that down succinctly. There's power in the name. How did you land on the name Zeneca? What does it mean?
Yeah. So in March last year, March 2021, I was getting into this space and my friends were like, oh, you got to get on Twitter, all of this stuff on NFT and crypto. Actually, this was before I'd like fully gone down the NFT rabbit hole. I was just general crypto knowledge. Everyone said you got to have Twitter, and then Discord is the other thing, So I said I had an old Twitter account from my online poker days, but I hadn't used it in 5 years, and it was just following a bunch of poker players. And I tried using it for a little bit, but my feed was not right. And I was like, all right, let me just create a new account. And sort of like the thing to do in this space is create like a pseudonym and an identity that you use for your online persona. And honestly, I only put like 5 or 10 minutes thought into it. And I just said, all right, let me come up with an account name. What do I think of? And one of my favorite authors and someone I've taken a lot of inspiration from is the Stoic philosopher Seneca. And so I was like, all right, cool. That makes sense. I think I literally probably looked around my desk for inspiration. I probably had a book by Seneca on my desk. I was like, all right, cool. All right, that's fun. I didn't want to just copy Seneca, and it was obviously taken. And then somehow Zeneca just popped into my head. Maybe because like COVID was, much more in the news then, and there's a vaccine brand, AstraZeneca. But like to my mind, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool because I'm also a fan of Buddhism and like Zen lifestyle, and I think merging those two together is very much indicative of my personality. And it seemed like it was just like a fun, cool name, Zeneca. That was taken as well. And then I said I was 33 years old at the time, so I just went Zeneca 33, and that's how that identity and name was born.
That's so dope. Do you have other favorite philosophers?
Yeah, mostly Stoic philosophers. I like Marcus Aurelius a lot. Who else? I like René Descartes. I like Voltaire. I like Socrates. I just like philosophy in general. I like Confucius. I think it's really interesting as you get into philosophy more and more, you see the same concepts born by completely different parts of the world that would have had no interaction. Like Confucian philosophy and Greek philosophy is like, came up independently of one another, but they came to very similar arrangements. And that to me just cements. And the fact that we're still talking about it today, 2,000 years plus on, is the fact that like, all right, these are like core fundamental human things and ideas that transcend time and transcend region, and like everyone can sort of, when you really distill things down to that core level, it makes sense, and it really resonated with me. So basically, like my entire life and worldview changed when I started like reading and getting into philosophy, probably like 6 years ago, 7 years ago now. I unfortunately don't read much these days, but it's really shaped the way that I think.
Are there any 3 books that have had a profound impact in your life?
Yeah, I mean, the first one that I always say is Letters from a Stoic, and that's by Seneca. It's a collection of letters that he wrote to various people, but mostly one friend. And it's just life lessons and just Stoic philosophy in a nutshell, I think. That's one. Another one is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Very much in the same ilk. I find it fascinating for different reasons. I personally like Letters from a Stoic a little more, but it's just maybe a personal writing style. But Meditations is by Marcus Aurelius, was like quite literally the most powerful individual in the world, and he was writing these thoughts that were never intended to be released publicly. It was almost like his private just journal notebook, and it was all about being humble and being authentic and being good and genuine and doing the right thing. And I think that's really powerful. And yeah, that's 2 books. Why We Sleep. I'll probably just say that. It had a profound impact on my dedication to sleep and understanding that. I'm going to bonus answer 4. Man's Search for Meaning. And so Viktor Frankl, he tremendous person who's been through horrific. He's a Holocaust survivor. He was in concentration camps and wrote about his experiences. And basically, again, I don't know independently or not, but at the core of it came down to these same fundamental tenets of Stoic and this type of philosophy where it's like, I have control over I can't control the situation I'm in. I'm in a horrific, awful situation, but I can control how I react to it. I can control my mind, and I can decide to find the good out of a horrific situation and try and help others. And that is a really powerful book. So, yeah.
No, I love those recommendations for sure. I'm someone who studied political philosophy in school, so I've been a philosophy nerd the whole time. So, and even Meditations by Aurelius is a book I had actually started. It got recommended by another philosopher I follow on Twitter called Naval, and he was like, "That's a good book to really check out." Let's transition to ZenAcademy. Right, it's a year old. How did the idea of ZenAcademy come about, and what has been the response so far?
Yeah, it's crazy. It is. Yeah, it's just over a year old. The Discord was opened late June 2021. The idea came about because basically I've been in the space for a few months. Honestly, not that long of a time, but like time in this space is weird, and a few months felt like forever. And I'd already been like flipping and trading a lot, and I was getting burnt out. And I just sort of like took a step back and thought and took stock, and I was like, is this something I really want to be doing forever or even for another year? And coming as a poker player, I'd always known I didn't want to be playing poker when I was 50. I don't want to be playing poker forever. It was always a fun thing to do, and I enjoyed it, and it was good to me, and it was exciting and interesting, but it was never a true passion of mine. And part of that was because I never reconciled with the fact that as a poker player, I'm not adding anything to the world. Like you're almost a vampire, and I never fully reconcile with that. And like the world does not need professional poker players. It's just not something that we need in the world. It's the best argument you can make for them is sure you provide an avenue for people who want to recreationally play poker to play. But I think that's a really weak and terrible argument. At the end of it, you're basically just taking money from people who are less good at a game than you, and you're not adding value. So I started noticing like some similarities between like flipping NFTs and JPEGs and trading and that whole world, whereas like they're very competitive in nature. You would mint something and then try and sell it to someone else at an inflated price and profit off that. And sure, maybe they profit further, or maybe, they wanted to just pay a premium and collect it. And there are definitely reasons. I don't think flippers are bad by any means. It was a combination of getting burnt out and not wanting to do that anymore, and feeling like a desire to do something more productive and add back and give value. And so then I started thinking, what can I do? And I had released my newsletter as like the first thing that I created in terms of like content, I think like a month, 6 weeks prior, and it had started gaining traction. And I was like, oh, this is nice. This feels good. People are reading my stuff and saying, hey, I appreciate it. And I learned something. I was like, oh, okay, what's this warm, fuzzy feeling of helping people? So I was like, all right, how can I lean into that and do sort of spend more of my time on content and helping people? I was like, well, it would be cool to have an NFT project, but I think a lot of people in the space eventually have the idea of, oh, it'd be cool to have my own project, but I'm not an artist. I'm not a game designer. I'm not a developer. I didn't have any of the requisite skills to create anything traditional. But again, I had this content, and my Twitter was sort of blowing up in following, and people were like resonating and appreciating like my threads and things that I was putting out there and my content. So I said, maybe I can lean into that and just create more content. And specifically, I noticed that there was and still is a great gap and void in sort of like the onboarding and learning process for someone new to this space to get into NFTs and crypto. It's so difficult. It still is. The sort of exact train of thought that led to ZenAcademy was I thought about how I had friends and family members that would come to me, and I think everyone in the space eventually does, who go, hey, I've seen an NFT, especially last year when they were all on the news and celebrities and everything. They're like, hey, this NFT thing, it's everywhere. I'm kind of interested. Can you sort of like teach me and like help me get started? And, I'm happy to, and mostly people are happy to, but what's the process there? It's very difficult. You sort of tell them, maybe you give them some YouTube videos to watch, some articles to read, some people to follow on Twitter, some like beginner-friendly Discords to join, and you tell them, maybe you help them set up a MetaMask wallet. You tell them, come back to me, ask me like questions, and they're going to have like 50 questions, and I'll help you and walk you through. And like half the time, the first question is, what the hell is Discord, and do I really need to use Twitter? And then you have to go back and forth and hold their hands, and it's not scalable. And so I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could create ZenAcademy, a website where everyone, whenever we had a friend or a family member who came to want to learn, the answer would be, hey, just go to ZenAcademy. It will teach you step by step everything you need to learn. And I got really excited by the idea. I was like, all right, cool, let's do this. And for 2 or 3 weeks, I was like thinking, all right, great. So we'll have a timeline, a history of NFTs, setting up a wallet, different blockchains. And then like as I kept digging deeper, I was like, this is a monumental task. There's a reason it doesn't exist yet, because like the amount of knowledge and information out there to catch people up, let alone keep it current and updated because it's constantly changing, is insane. And to do that in a way that's not overwhelming and that's an easier on, it was just too much. So I sort of like put a pin in ZenAcademy for a while and went back to the drawing board and basically put it on ice. I had launched the Discord server at this point, so I said, let me just launch a server and like try to create a little bit of a community. And so that was in June. And then it wasn't until October that I sort of like revisited the idea of like an NFT project around ZenAcademy and taking ZenAcademy to another level. And so I just thought, well, instead of like trying to launch this be all end all platform from the top down, maybe I'll reverse it and just like build it from the ground up, where I could go, we'll launch and it's just primarily we exist on Discord, a community where people can come and ask questions and I will be there to answer them. Other community members will hopefully be there to answer them and help people out on their journey in the early stages. And yeah, so I ended up launching and with an NFT to token gate the Discord, which in and of itself was a huge decision. And like I went back and forth about making it free, making it not. Ultimately, I decided on sort of a hybrid solution where it is token gated because to protect against scammers, and we had instances of scammers coming in and unfortunately scamming members. And so just to have that slight barrier to entry, but also to have a free option. So even today, anyone can join the Discord and read all of the content and be part of that for free and sort of get that information, as well as sort of like we are pushing to create a lot of content on external platforms that are free. So podcasts, I'm making a big push on YouTube now. My newsletter's free and just like disseminating information, various contents. And yeah, that's like the birth of ZenAcademy basically.
As far as online platforms go for growing your online community, right? Some people obviously have had issues with maybe like a Discord with members getting scammed, or even Twitter. I think your Twitter account got hacked as well.
Yeah.
Like, what are your thoughts around like the future of some of these platforms? Because obviously we need them to be a little bit more secure, but also flexible enough to really onboard online communities. Like, have you thought around that as well? Like, even when the Twitter being hacked, what was that experience like?
Yeah, so I mean, to answer the first part, I've definitely thought about like alternative options and solutions, and people always ask for like, we need a better Discord and stuff like that. Ultimately, though, I think that it's not a Discord or a Twitter problem, it's a people problem. And most of the time anything happens, it's social engineering, it's phishing, maybe all the time, like, who knows exactly. And then, so that happens how servers get hacked and accounts get hacked and sometimes bypassing two-factor authorization and security factors. And I think if we move to a new platform, there'll just be similar issues translated over where, if the person in charge of the community gets their account socially engineered and compromised, then the same thing is going to happen most likely. So then I think that what really the best way to help is on an infrastructure and a education level, where the reason these hacks are so successful and scams are so successful is because when someone posts a link, they get people to click on the link, go to a website, sign a transaction with their MetaMask, not fully understanding what they're doing, and they end up losing assets. Either their wallet gets drained or that they sign over some money or whatever that is. And I think that is the bottleneck that needs to be solved. And that will happen with education and time and experience and better infrastructure. So we're seeing things like MetaMask has, better labeling for a transaction that might allow someone to move all your assets out. And I think we're seeing these Chrome extensions that will pop up if a website or contract seems like it's a scam, and they use sophisticated techniques and artificial intelligence and stuff to track that. So I think things will get better over time. I don't think that like we need to move to a new platform and that's going to solve things. I think we need to sort of get back to basics and sort of solve this problem at a core, fundamental level. Yeah. And then in terms of my Twitter getting hacked, yeah, it was a wild, interesting, terrifying, scary experience. It happened like literally 24 hours prior. Yuga Labs had tweeted that they had intel or information that there was a coordinated attack coming on a lot of high profile accounts. And I posted that in ZenAcademy and the 333 Club, my other community, and said, hey, please be on high alert. We are not going to post any links or mints or anything like that. And then 24 hours later, someone compromised my account. I don't know exactly how it happened yet. I had two-factor authorization on using Google Auth, which should be very secure. But I believe there's still a way to fish that. And then the other option is that there's some compromise at the Twitter level, either an employee gone rogue or like an exploit or a bug that someone's found in their coding. That's like all these scenarios seem unlikely to me, but it's probably one of them, and I don't know which. But the sort of the reaction from the community in the immediate aftermath was good to see. Like, people spread the word so quickly. The account got frozen within like 10, 15 minutes. The website domain got taken down because someone was able to reach out to the host, and all sorts of really good things happened. Unfortunately, people still did lose assets. And again, that's why I'm like motivated even more now to create content specific on better education and better security practices, and just disseminating more on that front.
No, definitely. Roy, so everyone gets to deal with failure at some point. What would you say was your most significant encounter with failure, and what lessons did it teach you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, a couple of different things. I mean, in the NFT and crypto space, I'll keep it contained to that. When I first launched ZenAcademy, so I launched 2 different token types. And so there was a ZenAcademy Genesis token, which is basically your access to ZenAcademy. It was at a 0.033 ETH mint price. I wanted to keep it as affordable as reasonable. It was a mint that was open for 2 weeks and an open edition, so people could come mint when gas was low, however many they want. That one went great and well. I had another token type called the 333 Club, and this was targeted towards largely project founders and builders. And I get a lot of people, especially at that time, but even today, asking for me to be an advisor on their project, or if I could hop on a half-an-hour call to give some feedback. And just constantly, this goes into the burnout question a bit, is like learning how to say no and like prioritizing time and stuff. I realize, realistically, I can't work with most people. The demand is too high, but maybe I could try some interesting experiment where I tokenize part of my time or this experience and my advisory services. And so I created this community called the 333 Club. And again, threes are just because I created my Twitter account when I was 33, and then I just kept that on brand. But there are 333 tokens, and the mint price is much higher at 3.33 ETH. And so I launched that by an application mint list only process where people would apply, I would accept them, put them on the mint list. And the day of the mint, it just didn't take off the way that I expected it to. I had about 1,500 people apply for it, and I selected 333 and put them on the list and announced it, tweeted it, and like 3 people maybe or 4 people minted in the first day or 2. And that, to me, my expectations were different, and I was expecting it to sell out a little more rapidly. In hindsight, I'm glad that it didn't. The way the slow sellout was much better. But that at the time felt like a bit of a failure, and I was like, what did I do wrong? And what can I change going forward? And I mean, there were a few things. I think my marketing and messaging around it was not the clearest. I was largely just using Twitter, and a lot of people might not see my tweets and stuff like that. And between the time that people applied and I've added them to the list and the time of the mint, it was like 4 to 5 weeks, which is forever in this space. And people changed their mind. They forgot about it. The market changed. Price of ETH went up and we went into a bit of a bear market. So a lot of those people weren't in a position to mint anymore. Yeah, it was a rough like 24 to 48 hours where I felt like I'd failed and I was a bit fearful, but maybe even less than 48, like 12 to 24 hours. And then I was like, I remember laying on the couch being like, all right, well, can't change the past. What can I do here? And so then I just started reaching out to everyone who replied. And I think over the course of a few months, I DM'd 1,000+ people just to check in and see if they had any questions about it, and just sort of open up a new line of communication, because I admitted that my messaging had not been clear or clear enough. And I've learned from that, and in the future we have other things coming up that new token launches that I think I'll be able to execute and message and do a lot better and communicate on a much better level. But over time we eventually did sell out, and I'm very happy with how that all turned out. So it was almost a blessing in disguise, but certainly for a moment it felt like a failure. Yeah, that's one that comes to mind. The other is more trading related, where like I just didn't take profits enough when, for instance, bought apes at 500,000. I probably should have sold one, and a lot of art blocks went up crazy high, and I didn't sell enough. But it's hard for me to think of those as failures or mistakes, because I've been so fortunate, and I still have like a portfolio that is valued, way more than I could have dreamed or imagined when I got into the space 18 months ago. Yeah, I try not to dwell on those quote unquote mistakes.
I think the philosophy probably plays a role in how you navigate even the mental across some of these projects. I think I was reading one of your articles, I think the Infinite Regret one, where you talked about aligning your emotions with your actions, not with the outcomes. Is that usually the advice you give to even newbies coming into the space?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's really tough to do, but
Yeah.
and I definitely don't do it all the time. But it's something worthy to strive towards, and because there's so much in this space and in life in general, it's outside of our control. Basically, everything is outside of our control except our thoughts and our actions. And it's so easy to get caught up and blame yourself or think that you made a mistake when you sold an NFT and then it went like 100x afterwards, or you decided not to buy one and then 100x, or you buy one and then it goes to zero. But in reality, most of that is outside your control. Like most of that is based on the market and the sentiment of other people and the macro conditions and all these factors that you really have no control over. All you have control over is, oh, did I make a good decision at the time to buy or sell? And that is when you look at things like your risk profile and your investment thesis and your time horizon and your bankroll management and all of those kind of things. Like, for instance, I sold 3 Fidenzas for less than 1 ETH each. A Fidenza is worth about 100 ETH each today. But by selling them, like my bankroll was so small at the time, I minted them for 0.17. I sold them for like 0.5 or 0.6. That's a tremendous, within like a day, that's like a tremendous ROI by any metric. And then I was able to use that additional capital and the profit to then deploy and invest in other projects, which, led to other opportunities and successes. So while in a perfect world, yes, I would love to have not sold those and found a way to, keep everything. But that's just not the reality. And like going back and looking at that decision, I think I'm happy with that decision. I don't regret it because at the time it was the right decision to make, even though in hindsight, and it could have gone the wrong way. Like maybe Fidenzas didn't take off, maybe R blocks didn't take off, and then the full price tanked, and then I would have lost money. So,
you wrote that article on January 17th, right? The Infinite Regret one earlier this year. And then obviously we're in a bear market right now, right? And a lot of people have lost a lot of like their fortune even in the space. I think there was a particular quote in the article that you wrote by Bernard Meltzer, where he says the real measure of your wealth is how much you'd be worth if you lost all your money, right? I don't know. I think you've probably seen and heard a lot of stories about people who lost a lot of their money in the Terra ecosystem or even like just across crypto in general. What advice do you then have for them to navigate that? Because sometimes I know I've lost money during my own entrepreneurial pursuits, and then, you go to sleep and, the anxieties in your head, and you wake up and you're like, the sun is still coming up tomorrow. Like you still have the love of your family, you still have the love of your loved ones. And it's like finding other ways to get that feeling of worth that's not tied to the financial outcome.
Yeah, it's extraordinarily tough. And I think it's healthy and it's good to feel awful when you lose a ton of money or value or anything. Because if you didn't feel awful when that happens, you wouldn't feel great when the good things in life happen. But I think it's really healthy as well and important to be able to not dwell and spiral too much on, again, things outside of your control, which the past is. And as much as is possible, move, for lack of a better word, move on and like think about what you can do now and like what you have and moving forward and what lessons you can learn. And I think that, some people are better than this at others, and it takes, literally every single day or every moment of every day, it's like you have a decision to make about how you approach life and how you think about things and how you react to the circumstances that you're in. And, people's default emotions and default responses are going to vary. Generally, people's default emotions to losing a bunch of money is like sadness, depression, anxiety, fear, wallowing and caught up in like self-loathing perhaps, or self-pity, thinking about their all-time high net worth on paper and like imagining, oh, if I just sold then I could have bought a house and now I'm here, and comparing themselves to that. It's not at all unusual. I think everyone goes through that, myself included. Like we all do at times, but it's sort of the amount of time that you spend in that zone is, I think, where the massive difference happens, where some people are better at snapping out of it or like, pulling themselves out of it or being pulled out of it with friends. Like I think definitely lean on friends and other people than others. And it takes time and experience and learning and vigilance and all these kind of things to get better at that. I guess to answer the original question, like, what is my advice for people? I think just knowing that you're very much not alone, and like there's so many people going through this, and so many of the most successful people in the world have so many failures. So many of the most successful people in crypto today, like you look around at the quote unquote whales, or the people that have like crazy net worths and bags, and you hear like, oh yeah, and they say, oh yeah, in 2013 I went broke, I lost everything, I had all my funds in an exchange that rugged or something like that, or in 2015 I got hacked, or in 2017 I went all in on ICOs and they all went to zero and took on too much risk, and they learn and they stick around and they take advantage of future opportunities. And I think if you frame it that way and think of all of these unfortunate experiences as learning experiences and stick around in the space, I think that's the important thing. And then even at the core of that, like go back to like appreciating what you might have in life. If you have a family, if you have friends, if you have a pet, if you have a child, if you have your health, those are good things to lean on. And in some instances, you have none of that. You don't have a family, you don't have your health, you're not in great health. And it gets increasingly more difficult, I would say, objectively, to remain positive and optimistic and happy in those situations. But it is absolutely possible. And again, going back to Viktor Frankl as an example, this is a human who was in, I think it was Auschwitz or maybe Dachau, a concentration camp, and found it within himself to have a positive mentality, at least some of the time, maybe not all the time, but was able to find that. And again, it comes down at the core of it. We have within ourselves the ability to decide how we react to external situation. And you can take anything and everything away from a human, but if they have their ability to think, they have the ability to be happy. And I think it's so difficult to do. It's something that most people struggle with. No one gets right perfect all the time, but I think it's a really good thing to strive and work towards.
Definitely. So Roy, if the only thing left in the world was to read a book about your life, what would the title of the book be and why?
It's a really good question. So I've thought about writing a book a bunch. Like even before crypto and NFTs, I've always liked writing, but I never really had a good idea or topic or anything. And then into this space, I've thought about writing a book as well on many different topics, but just haven't gotten around to it, basically. I think Infinite Regret would be a nice just title and a starting off point of a book that I write. But if it was the only book left in the world, I don't think I'd want that to be called Infinite Regret. I think that's it's a little pessimistic and dark, but
it's a book about your life.
I think I'd so in poker, often people would ask you for advice, me or anyone, and like, how would you play a hand? And they'd tell you just a couple of bits of information. I had pocket aces and I raised and they 3-bet and then, flop came this. What would you do? And the answer is always, it depends. There's so many factors that you have to take into account that basically almost no one actually explains all of the factors. And in reality, at the end of the day, it always depends on so many different things. And I think that is a good approach to take to poker, to crypto and NFTs. Like, would you invest in this project? And I was like, it depends. And so I would probably title the book, It Depends. And so anything that you think about in life, any situation, it always depends on perspective and reflection and so many other things that there are no black and white answers, basically. Everything depends. Everything is perspective. Everything is at the core of it comes down to how you react to external events. And I think it would be called It Depends.
I love that title. Right. We ask all the guests who come on the show this particular question. And the question is, what does being Afropolitan mean to you?
Yes, another great question. I think it's extraordinarily exciting. To me, it sort of it means pushing the boundaries and doing something innovative and new using blockchain technology and community building in a way that is truly innovative and like powerful. Your Afropolitan, the ability to. This is not possible without the blockchain, basically. So the whole idea is using the native technology in a way to enhance people's lives, bring people together, deliver value, create a community, build together, and not for someone else, but like for each other, for yourselves, strengthen these bonds. And I think at the heart and soul of it, this is what Web3 is all about. It's about giving power back to individuals and to people, and cutting out the middleman, the middle people, or like restoring a bit of that power balance between giant corporations, entities, nations, and almost democratizing it and making it more equal. It's never going to be perfect. Like it's like I'm always reminded of this is a quote by Winston Churchill. He says, democracy is the worst form of government except for every other form. I think about that often with Web3, with blockchain, with NFTs, with DAOs. I'm like, they're not perfect. They're awful, but they're better than the alternatives. If done right, they can be better than the alternatives. And I think that's like, we make progress. And I think, just the potential here is really exciting to me.
Right, man. Thank you for stopping by the Afropolitan Podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Would love to have you back sometime, but it has been a pleasure hosting you on the podcast, bro.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'd love to be back. This is really great questions. I loved, they were different, and I love being able to think differently. They're not the same standard questions, so I really appreciate it.
You get philosopher type questions over here when two philosophers talk. Thank you, Roy. Have a great one, man.
You too.
Thank you for listening to the Afropolitan Podcast. We are building the future of a progressive Black community. To join our community, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Afropolitan. Be sure to join our Discord and Clubhouse community by clicking on the link tree on our Instagram page. See you on social.